Well, hello there, you scrub lords, and welcome to a new series of videos where I talk about random shit. I'm going to be calling this the Scrub Chat series. It's going to be sort of along the lines of what Jingles does with his Mingles with Jingles series, what Sercon does with his Q&A series, and it's just going to be me talking about random shit as if I don't already do that already. So today is going to be more of a Q&A session. I'm planning on doing maybe a follow-up episode either tomorrow or the next day on the leaked vehicles that are going to be coming up in the next patch. I'm not going to be covering that today in this episode, though. That's going to be another episode entirely because I want to go into detail with that one. In any case, so let's get on with the questions here, and the question that everybody asks me on a regular basis is, what voice do you use in your unicorn reviews, and how do you do it? I use a program called Balabolka, and the program, the voice that I use, the specific name for it is called Scansoft Daniel. Scansoft is a text-to-speech company, and they develop certain voices, and Scansoft Daniel is the quote-unquote MLG voice that they use. You can go and look up Balabolka. It's a free download. Scansoft Daniel, I think there's a free download somewhere. If I can find it, I'll link it in the video description so you guys can start making hilarious videos and stuff like that. And something I should quickly touch on, other people who do similar reviews to mine in terms of War Thunder, I really don't care. If you guys have a great idea and you guys have a funny way to describe a vehicle, by all means do it, and link it to me, because I want to see it. I think most of that shit is hilarious. A good example of this is Spacecat. Some people have been going on to his videos and be like, oh, you've stolen Miles' videos and stuff and all this other thing. No, I really don't care. I think it's hilarious. Spacecat makes some really, really cool stuff. I'll link his channel in the video description. You should totally go and sub to his channel. He makes some really, really good stuff. Another example of this is Webe. Webe made a couple of videos in a very similar fashion. One on the Panzer II-H and one on the M8A1, very, very rare Tier 1 American Premium, which you can't actually get anymore. In any case, those guys are hilarious. Go check them out. Links to both of them in the video description here. So my second question here comes from Sebastian Cranen. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. What goes into making your unicorn reviews? Okay, so the process is actually relatively simple. So I get an idea of what vehicle I'm going to do. This week I have no idea, but let's say I'm gonna, for a bunch of you guys' sake, I'm gonna do the ZIS-30. So what I do is I go out and I record a bunch of gameplay for the ZIS-30. I will generally play a couple of games without recording, because I find that if I'm trying to record something live, I generally do much worse in the vehicle because I know I'm recording and I'm under that pressure than if I'm just playing. If I'm just playing, then I do fine. And in any case, so I go out and I record some gameplay for the ZIS-30. And this has to be in no particular order whatsoever, really. I will go through the replay files, record that, and then I will compile all the footage together in a file for myself, so that way I know where to go. Once I've done that, I will create the thumbnail. By the way, creating thumbnails is probably one of my most favorite parts. If there's one thing I learned coming out of high school, it's how to use Photoshop, and believe me, learning Photoshop, oh, it's helped me so much in terms of building this channel. In any case, so I'll build the thumbnail at some point in the process, and the hardest part of the process is writing the scripts. Like I said, I use Balabolka, and the way Balabolka works is you basically type scripts of things that you want to say out into this sort of like a window, much like you would on Microsoft Word or Google Docs. So I type out these scripts, and the scripts, by the way, are the hardest part, because that's where the voice comes from. That's what makes it funny. And if I'm not giggling to myself halfway through, or like throughout this process as I'm making these unicorn reviews in the scripts, then I generally scrap it and make another one. The scripts can take me anywhere from a couple of hours to a couple of days worth of work depending on how derpy the vehicle is. If the vehicle's like relatively average, then it becomes a little bit more difficult to write the scripts. That's also why I don't do, as a policy to myself, I don't do the same nation 2 weeks in a row. Because the jokes don't have any originality to them at that point. And they're not as funny. If you spread them out over several weeks at a time and people come back and they get a refresher, then that becomes a lot more funny than if I was to just spam the same jokes over and over. If I did like 5 American vehicles in a row, then it wouldn't be funny by the time you got to the second or third vehicle. So I will generally write the script. Once I've recorded the footage and written the script, that's the hardest part's done. Then I just drop those into the, I press a button, I create an MP3 file of the script, I drop that into the video editing software that I've used. By the way, the video editing software that I use is Adobe Premiere Pro, the 2015 version. And once I've dropped it in there, I go through and I edit the video. And then once the video is done and edited, I render it. It takes like 15 minutes to render these videos. Pop it up on YouTube, add all the annotations. Basically, when I put it up on YouTube, I first make sure that it's private, so that way nobody's seeing it before it's ready. And then I will put annotations and cards and links to anybody who was in the video, and then I'll put it public, and then you guys can see it. So that's basically the process. The third question that I get, or that I've gotten here, is from Hayseed on YouTube. Gaijin has already upped the ground BR to 8.3, so are they planning to max the BR to 9.0 in order to accommodate tanks like the T-72, the M1 Abrams, etc.? The reason why they upped the BR to 8.3 with the IT-1 was because the IT-1 was just such a ridiculously strong vehicle, it still is, that if it was being thrown up against 7.0 vehicles, well, it wasn't good. Actually, even throwing it against vehicles of its equivalent tier, it doesn't end very well for those vehicles. I've already said before in the Unicorn review that the IT-1 is the strongest ATGM vehicle currently in the game. The Swingfire might end up challenging it, but all around, the IT-1 is the top dog in terms of ATGMs. It's second generation, it's got 500 millimeters of pen, which is more than enough to kill anything. It's got a very, very low profile, it's armored, so you can't just aim in its general direction, you actually have to aim at it. It's just a great all-around vehicle. It's also quick as well, so you've got to take that into account. But in any case, back to the original question, raising the BR to 8.3, maybe raising it to 9.0, I'm not sure. Gaijin, the issue with raising the BR to 9.0 in the past has been that there generally wasn't enough, vehicles in Tier 5 in order to justify that. With the amount of Tier 5 vehicles we're going to be getting in the upcoming patch, I think we're getting like 5 or 6 in the next patch, according to some of the leaks that we've been getting. At least for tanks, not even counting aircraft. That might be more of a possibility. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm not totally sure. So the number 4 question comes from Elliot Grossman. Do you think the M60A2 will be added? Possibly. With the introduction of the Leopard 1, the M60A2 could easily potentially be put into the game. Or the Leopard 1A1. Did I say regular Leopard 1? Whatever. The M60A2, I think, would be an excellent addition to the Tier 5 Americans. However, I don't think that they should put it in a straight line like they've been doing. In my personal opinion, what they should do is, at the M60, is they should split off the research into a sort of T shape. So you'd have so from the M60, you'd go down, you'd have a T shape. So on one branch of the development would be the M60A1, the other branch of development would be the M60A2. Either that, or figure out a way to split off some of the vehicles so that you're not having to grind through one vehicle after another straight down in Tier 5 for the Americans. Because, frankly, it's really annoying to do that. And I feel that if you give players more choice at Tier 5 for any of the nations, then it drastically improves the, not only the player base at Tier 5, I feel, in terms of the number of people playing Tier 5, but it also encourages people to say, oh god, I don't have to grind through 6 tanks to get to this one vehicle that I really, really want. And I think that would really, really help with the Tier 5 grind right now. But to answer your original question, yes, I think the M60A2 Starship would be a really, really interesting addition to it. Fucking airplanes, man, I swear. It's like I'm near an airport or something. In any case, in case you guys don't realize what the M60A2 is, the M60A2, commonly called Starship, was a modification to the standard M60 chassis, where they fitted a new turret onto it, mounting an experimental 152mm gun launcher, very much like a Sheridan. To put it simply, the M60A2 would be like an up-armored Sheridan with less mobility, just on an M60 hull. So, I think that'd be an excellent addition to the American Tier 5s. It'd also give the Americans some variety in their ATGM vehicles. So, question number 5 is from Michael Boyd on YouTube. So, if they threw out the 1969 time limit, wouldn't you expect them to now throw out their words and put in composite armor? I mean, if there was a demand for it, I would expect them to do it. Now, for those of you guys who aren't aware, the current technical limit, I guess you could say, on tanks is not necessarily based on the years, because tank technology development was a little bit slow after World War II in terms of armor protection. So the next big step logically or technologically in tank development would be composite armor. The very first vehicle the very first main battle tank to have composite armor was the T-64, which is a Russian main battle tank from the Cold War era. And that was supposed to be the replacement of most of the Russian main battle tanks, to my knowledge, in any case. However, Gaijin have said that they're not going to add composite armor, and they're not going to add ERA. Now, a lot of people have been making the point, well, they also said no smooth bores, they also said no ATGMs, what's stopping them from putting composite armor in? Well, adding different ways to kill the enemy is different from adding armor, because if you add in more guns to kill the enemy, people are killing each other, which means that you're gaining experience, you're gaining credits, and you're advancing. If you're adding in armor, you drastically reduce if you add in vehicles with composite armor, you drastically reduce the amount of kills that are going on. You drastically up the tempo of technological development, and then you add in a whole series of vehicles, which would be ridiculously difficult to balance. Because really, a lot of these composite armored vehicles are only really penetrable from the side. The T-64 itself would have effectively more armor than a mouse, and it would be far more mobile. It would have a really, really powerful 125mm smoothbore gun, and how do you balance that? So I'm not sure that Gaijin would overstep their boundaries here, because the problem that Gaijin is facing right now is that they don't want to add very many paper vehicles. But they're also running out of vehicles they can add, I feel, in terms of that were actually built in wider amounts of production. And also it feels like their focus right now is to flesh out Tier 5 a ton, because let's face it, the Tier 5 tech trees for most of the nations over the course of tanks development and War Thunder has been quite limited. Now, for people who are at the end game point, like myself, where we've got most of the vehicles in the game, this is actually pretty cool, because it gives us some top-tier stuff that we can grind towards and we can be excited about. For most people who are playing, I think most of the community right now plays Tier 4, that's also kind of exciting, because it means that once they get into Tier 5, they've got all these vehicles to look forward to. But for people who are early Tier 4 to Tier 3, or lower than that, this really couldn't concern them. And it's totally irrelevant to them. Right now, what it feels like Gaijin is trying to do is they're trying to please their paying customers as much as they can by adding in new stuff for their paying customers to throw gold at. Not to say that's actually a pretty good strategy from a business point of view, But also from a consumer point of view, it can be kind of annoying. It's the fact that there's all these cool vehicles coming out, and I really want to throw money at the game, but I don't have that kind of money to throw at it. So, especially in my case, since I'm in between, part-time jobs, my income for gold is completely based upon how much Gaijin gives me every month. So, in that regard, I'm going to be grinding out a lot of these vehicles. The first time I'm probably going to get access to these vehicles is with 30-day rentals, which is how I review a lot of these Tier 5 vehicles that come out. In any case, on to the next question. So question number 6 comes from Caleb J on YouTube. ManyMilesAway, do you think they should add the Object 430 and or the Object 432 for the Russians? They're lacking just a little in the competitive tank department, in my opinion. That would be interesting. However, I don't feel that the Russians are lacking in the competitive tank department at all, really. That would be an interesting way to start fleshing out the Tier 5s for the Russians. I feel that maybe you have the production vehicles like the T-54, 47, the 1949, the 1951, and the T-62, and then maybe create a separate category for the prototype medium tanks. So like the Object 430, the Object 140, the T-62A, or Object 432 or something like that. That would be an interesting dynamic to have two separate Russian medium tank lines. However, I mean, the Russians around this period were experimenting like crazy. They had prototypes upon prototypes upon prototypes at Tier 5. So I mentioned earlier that Gaijin may be running out of production vehicles. Yeah, they may be running out of production vehicles, but there's still a shitload of prototypes, especially in the years just following the Cold War and at the end of the Cold War. The Russians were experimenting with anything and everything they could get their hands on, or any concepts they could get their hands on to try and improve their armor development at that period. So I don't think that I think that it would be an interesting series of vehicles to add, but if they're going to add them, then they're going to have to create a new line. Otherwise, we're going to end up with another series of American medium tanks. I mean, granted, the American Tier 5 mediums are legitimate upgrades from each other, but there's so many of them right now. I mean, I think there's like 5 or 6 Tier 5s or Tier 5 mediums for the Americans. Most of them are shit, but a couple of them are actually pretty good. So it would be cool to have those new Russian Tier 5 mediums, but I don't think that they're necessarily required right now. So this actually kind of leads into question number 7 by Tyrannosaurus Rex. For the Q&A, what do you think about Soviet Tier 5s, and which tanks would you add/remove from it to make it more balanced and fun? Let's see. What do I think about Tier 5 tanks? I think the Soviet Tier 5s, and to answer your first question, is actually in a pretty good place right now. The T-62 is meh, but I feel that it's an almost definite upgrade over the T-54 in a lot of respects. It does a lot of things that the T-54 can't do. It's got a massive firepower improvement, except in the rate of fire department. But if you've been playing the Russian heavies up until that point, that shouldn't the reload on the T-62 shouldn't be as bad, especially if you're used to driving things like the T-10. Which tanks would I add and remove to make it more balanced and fun? I would definitely remove the IT-1 and come up with, maybe replace that with the BMP-1 armed with ATGMs. I feel that would be a far better balancing feature, and I think it would fall in line with the other ATGM vehicles so far that we've gotten and are going to get, because almost all of the ATGM vehicles, except for the IT-1, are glass cannons, to put it bluntly. The M551 Sheridan has like 38 millimeters of armor. The Raketen Jagdpanzer has like 50, which is nothing really. The Swingfire is not going to have a lot of armor. And the IT-1 is the most well-armored and all-rounded ATGM vehicle in the game. It can take a hit if it needs to, whereas the other ATGM vehicles couldn't dream of that. The STR-V81, I guess you could argue, could take a hit, but it's in a much lower battle rating, so I'm talking mostly about the Tier 5 ATGMs. But I would definitely remove the IT-1 and replace that with like a BMP with like one of the Sagar missile systems, or I forget what they're called exactly. Somebody tell me down in the comment section, please. because I'm too lazy to go and research it right now. So to answer your question, I would remove the IT-1, replace that with a BMP with an ATGM, and I feel that would make the Russian Tier 5s far more balanced in general. The rest of the vehicles I'm perfectly fine with. The SU-122-254 is a very, very underappreciated tank destroyer, I feel. It's a 7.3 battle rating, yet it gets the Heat FS rounds with 400 mils of penetration. So it's the same battle rating as an IS-3 and a T-54-47, yet I hardly ever see it, and that's mostly down to the fact that I feel that most people don't realize how to play the vehicle. So I think the Soviet Tier 5s are in a pretty good place right now. So question number 8 comes from number 83279, random guy. What are your thoughts on Japanese tanks, and would it be hard for Gaijin to add them into War Thunder, since I think it's going to be like a Tier 1 and a Tier 2, and then a huge gap until Tier 4, lol. Also, this new Q&A series should be called Boys and Questions. Well, I don't know. I'm not that big of a fan of the suggestion for the questions. Also, I came up with one already. In any case, back to your original question. What do I think on Japanese tanks? I think Japanese tanks would be an interesting addition to War Thunder. However, Gaijin is going to struggle a lot in terms of adding new content and keeping the Japanese tanks updated, because they would be forced to add in a lot of paper designs to really flesh out the Japanese tanks. I mean, just look at World of Tanks. I mean, World of Tanks had a hugely difficult time with the Japanese heavies. I mean, from Tier 5 in World of Tanks to Tier 10, except for the OI Experimental, all of those vehicles are paper tanks. So, like, let's say Tier 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, all of those vehicles are paper tanks. They were never built. And if you were going to add any of those vehicles into War Thunder, it would be extremely difficult, I feel, to, well, not necessarily balance them, but it would be one of those things where you're driving around and all of a sudden you see a slightly smaller barn driving around the middle of the map, firing cannon and, in some cases, flamethrowers. Throughout the middle of the map, it really doesn't make any sense to add a lot of those Japanese Tier 5 heavies. However, some of their mediums, like the Chinook-Kai and a couple of other of their experimental tank destroyers, would be interesting to see. The Ho-Ri 1 and the Ho-Ri 2, or as I like to call them, the Ho-Ri shits, are ridiculous vehicles. Think of basically a Ferdinand with a coaxial 37mm gun in the hull, like a hull-mounted 37mm anti-tank gun, and then a 105mm long-barreled anti-tank gun mounted in a superstructure. And that's basically what a Ho-Ri 1 or a Ho-Ri 2 is. So I guess my response to that question is, I would like to see them, but at the same time, I don't have very high hopes for them. And I feel like they're going to be kind of all over the place, and there's not going to be any real pattern to them. So, again, we'll just have to wait and see, but I'd like to see them, but it's going to be interesting to see how they actually implement them in game. So with that last question, that's going to wrap it up, our first episode of Scrub Talks Q&A with ManyMilesAway. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, please leave a like, and if you guys have any other questions, please leave them down in the comment section for me, so that way I can keep making these episodes and I don't run out of material. So if you guys have any further questions that I didn't answer today, but you want to see them answered in some way, shape, or form, leave a question down in the comment section, and I will see you guys on the stream later today. Just keep an eye on my YouTube channel. And with that, keep your tracks in check, keep a lookout with your binoculars, and I will see you on the next video. This is ManyMilesAway, signing off.